June 4th, 1943, Norfolk Naval Base, Virginia. Unteroffizier Hermann Bucher gripped the ship's railing as he stepped onto the gangplank, his legs trembling after 14 days crossing the Atlantic. Through the morning haze, he saw something that contradicted 3 years of Nazi propaganda. American dock workers, both white and black, operated side by side with machinery that looked like it belonged to a future century. Women in coveralls ran cranes with easy confidence. Children sold newspapers at the gates, and no one ran or hid at the sight of enemy uniforms. "Die Spinnen, die Amerikaner," he whispered to the man behind him. The Americans are crazy. Bucher would later record this moment in his memoir Behind Barbed Wire, published in Germany in 1952, one of the most detailed accounts of POW life in the United States. Norfolk Naval Base sprawled across 4,300 acres, its docks stretching beyond sight, cranes loading and unloading dozens of ships at once. In a single morning, this one port handled more tonnage than Hamburg could process in an entire week. But it wasn't the scale that stunned the arriving prisoners. It was the normality. Civilians wandered freely near military installations. Vendors sold coffee and donuts within sight of warships. A brass band played popular music at a nearby war bond rally. And here stood 2,500 veterans of Rommel's Afrika Korps, the first major contingent of what would become 425,000 German POWs held in the United States by war's end. What they witnessed in the coming months would not be American abundance. That story had been told. They would witness something far more unsettling to the military mind. A nation at war that did not behave like one, a society so confident in its power that it treated mortal enemies like unruly house guests, and a people whose strange customs would undermine Nazi ideology more effectively than any battlefield defeat. Processing at Norfolk, the first shock. The intake procedures began with what Bucher later described as the first impossibility. German military doctrine, practiced in Poland, France, and Africa, held that prisoners were either assets to exploit or burdens to minimize. The Geneva Convention was acknowledged when convenient and ignored when not. Yet here, American officers read Geneva Convention rules in fluent German, explaining rights, procedures, and even asking about dietary needs. International Red Cross records from June 1943 note that Jewish American personnel, including several sergeants with unmistakably Jewish surnames, distributed Red Cross packages while explaining that kosher meals were available for any Jewish prisoners. Several Wehrmacht soldiers laughed nervously, assuming mockery. It was not. The American military had prepared for religious dietary requirements of the enemy. Medical treatment that defied logic. Prisoners with wounds received the same penicillin, a miracle drug scarce in German field hospitals, that American soldiers received. Swiss Red Cross Inspector Guy Maher wrote in his July 1943 report, "Medical treatment provided to German POWs equals or exceeds that given to American military personnel." African American medical technicians served in integrated units at Norfolk, though not throughout the U.S. military. One documented case involved a black medic drawing blood from Wehrmacht officers during routine screening. In Germany, such racial contact was legally forbidden. Here, it was military routine. The first meal. Impossible to comprehend, German prisoners were escorted into a mess hall where American sailors ate. The two groups, men who had been trying to kill each other in convoy battles, ate in the same facility. Americans on one end, Germans on the other, sharing the same lines and the same quality of meals. The Americans barely looked at them, more focused on a radio broadcast of a baseball game than on enemies sitting 50 feet away. The train journey. The second shock. The 3-day train journey to camps in the interior created a new level of cognitive dissonance. Unlike Germany's secretive prisoner transports, American authorities made no attempt to hide the POWs. The trains were not boxcars, but actual passenger coaches with cushioned seats. At Union Station in Washington, D.C., witnessed by hundreds and recorded in station logs from June 1943, German POWs watched American families seeing off soldiers. Wives kissed husbands goodbye openly. Children waved flags. Teenagers shared milkshakes at the station restaurant. The same platform hosted enemies and families, separated only by windows and a handful of casually attentive guards. The trains passed industrial districts that should have been hidden. Instead, factories proudly displayed their names in huge letters. The Glenn L. Martin aircraft plant in Baltimore had parking lots filled with workers' personal vehicles. From the train, POWs could count rows of B-26 bombers awaiting delivery. No camouflage, no secrecy, no paranoia, just American industry operating openly in enemy view. Through Pennsylvania, the night sky glowed orange from steel mills running around the clock. Workers lived not in barracks but in individual homes with gardens. Electric lights burned in every window, radios on every roof. At a stop in Harrisburg, documented in Pennsylvania railroad records, German officers saw American laborers ending their shift, men wearing wristwatches, carrying lunchboxes, driving personal cars. Butcher wrote that one worker casually threw away a half-eaten apple and opened a new one. The waste stunned officers whose troops had fought over scraps in North Africa. Camp Hearn, Texas, a different world. Camp Hearn opened in December 1942 on 720 acres near the town of Hearn in Robertson County. Military records show it eventually housed up to 4,800 German POWs, in conditions better than what many had known as civilians in Germany. Army Corps of Engineers documents and War Department files reveal the infrastructure. Wooden barracks with electric lights, not oil lamps. Indoor plumbing, flush toilets, hot water heaters. Individual beds with mattresses, sheets, and blankets. Recreation halls with ping-pong tables, musical instruments, libraries. Swiss inspector Emil Sandstrom wrote in August 1943, "Conditions at Camp Hearn exceed not only Geneva Convention requirements, but surpass those known by many of the prisoners in Germany." Lieutenant Colonel Cecil Stiles, the camp commander, addressed prisoners in German. He had studied it in university. He explained that within military boundaries, prisoners would govern themselves. They would elect spokesmen, organize activities, and manage schedules. Self-governance for enemy soldiers seemed either weakness or a trap. Medical care in the camp. The camp hospital, inspected monthly by the Red Cross, contained equipment lacking in many German civilian hospitals. X-ray machines, surgical suites, dental equipment, adequate pharmaceutical stocks including penicillin. When prisoner Georg Gartner, who would become the last German POW to surrender in 1985, developed appendicitis in September 1943, he underwent surgery within hours. Captain William Calhoun, an Army surgeon from Dallas, performed it, with German POW medics assisting. The canteen. The third shock. Nothing prepared the prisoners for the camp canteen, a store where POWs could buy goods using script earned from voluntary labor. Cigarettes, chocolate, soap, writing supplies, art materials, even musical instruments. The War Department authorized these sales, believing comfort reduced escape attempts. The idea that enemy prisoners could shop shattered German military logic. Work programs, a new reality. By September 1943, labor shortages led to POW employment across Texas, documented in National Archives Record Group 389. Prisoners earned 80 cents per day in canteen script, the same base pay as American privates. King Ranch. At the King Ranch near Kingsville, 825,000 acres, larger than Rhode Island, German POWs worked beside Mexican-American vaqueros and black ranch hands. Racial mixing contradicted Nazi doctrine. Prisoners wrote home describing combine harvesters replacing dozens of workers, trucks replacing horse wagons, aircraft used for ranch surveying foremen. Richard Clayburgh Jr. treated POWs as temporary employees. On cotton gins and mills, at cotton gins in Taylor, Caldwell, and Waller counties, POWs witnessed processing speeds unimaginable in Europe. The Hearn cotton oil mill handled more in one day than German mills did in a month. Workers took regular breaks, ate full lunches, and listened to radios. Productivity through comfort, not punishment, contradicted Wehrmacht discipline. POWs were shocked to hear farmers criticize Roosevelt freely. FBI monitoring reports later confirmed their amazement. A farmer near Bryan told a Department of Agriculture inspector to "go to hell." He suffered no consequences. In Nazi Germany, such defiance meant death. Community interaction. Texas newspapers documented POW interactions with civilians. The Hearn Democrat, Bryan Daily Eagle, and Temple Daily Telegram all published accounts of POW work details and social encounters. In December 1943, the Hearn Democrat reported German POWs on supervised Christmas shopping trips where they observed teenagers at soda fountains, boys and girls together unchaperoned, jazz and swing music labeled degenerate by Nazi ideology. Youth culture unaffected by war. American women particularly shocked them. Women drove trucks, ran businesses, supervised male workers, served as pilots in the WASP program. WASP pilots flew from nearby Bryan Army Airfield between 1943 and 1944, easily visible to POW work groups. Religious life churches throughout Robertson County invited POWs to services. Records from First Baptist Church of Hearn, First Methodist Church, and St. Mary's Catholic Church confirm POW attendance. The Hearn Democrat reported on December 24, 1943. German prisoners attended Christmas Eve services alongside families whose sons are overseas. No incidents reported. Education and re-education. By early 1944, the Provost Marshal General's Special Projects Division established advanced educational programs at Camp Hearn. Declassified records show the camp library grew from 500 to 5,000 books. Books banned in Germany were available: Thomas Mann, Erich Maria Remarque, Lion Feuchtwanger, Sam Houston. State Teachers College provided courses. College records show 340 POWs enrolled in academic programs between 1944 to 45. Camp Hearn published a newspaper called Das Spiegel, The Mirror, not to be confused with the later magazine. Early issues promoted Nazi ideology. By late 1944, articles discussed democratic ideas. Psychological operations, declassified special projects. Division files reveal that prisoners were categorized: anti-Nazis, 10%, non-political, 75%, ardent Nazis, 15%. Each group received different handling to maximize ideological change. Anti-Nazis received privileges. Hardline Nazis were isolated. The majority were exposed gradually to American democratic norms and education. They became barracks leaders, discussion group moderators, and newspaper editors. Their influence on non-political prisoners was carefully cultivated and monitored. The screening process, developed by Army psychologists and German émigré advisors, included subtle tests. Prisoners' reactions to news of German defeats, their book choices from the camp library, participation in educational programs, and even their social interactions were documented. Weekly reports tracked ideological shifts across the camp population. Assistant Executive Officer Major Maxwell McKnight, whose papers are preserved at the Hoover Institution, wrote in a November 1944 report, "The transformation rate exceeds expectations. Approximately 60% of non-political prisoners show measurable movement toward democratic ideals after 6 months of exposure to American society and targeted education." Working in American facilities exposed POWs to a level of casual abundance that seemed like mockery of Germany's wartime scarcity. At the Alcoa aluminum plant in Rockdale, Texas, where POWs handled materials beginning in September 1943, workers discarded more aluminum scrap in a single day than German aircraft factories could acquire in a week. Plant records show German POWs were assigned to scrap collection, giving them direct exposure to American industrial waste. Food processing, the greatest psychological shock. At the Stokely Brothers Cannery in Cameron, Texas, verified through Milam County historical records, perfectly edible produce was routinely discarded for cosmetic flaws: underripe tomatoes, corn with irregular kernels, beans with minor blemishes. Meanwhile, German civilians faced starvation. A letter from POW Corporal Friedrich Müller, preserved in Red Cross archives, stated, "Today we destroyed hundreds of pounds of fruit because it did not meet canning standards. In Germany, this would be treasure. Here, it is garbage." The American supervisor apologized for the waste, not understanding he was apologizing for an abundance we cannot imagine. Christmas 1943 at Camp Hearn. Christmas at Camp Hearn is extensively documented in local newspapers, Red Cross reports, and War Department records. The entire town of Hearn, population 2,000, mobilized to ensure enemy prisoners had a proper Christmas celebration. The Hearn Democrat published a full list of donations on December 23, 1943. Local churches collected 4,800 gift packages, schools contributed handmade cards and decorations, American Legion Post, 164, veterans of WWII who had fought Germans, donated cigarettes, candy, and sports equipment. The Lions Club provided musical instruments. The Garden Club decorated camp facilities with holly and evergreen. The camp Christmas tree, photographed for the newspaper, stood nearly 30 feet tall in the main compound, illuminated with electric lights that burned day and night. Quartermaster records note that the camp used more electricity for Christmas decorations than most German villages received for all purposes combined, something unimaginable even in peacetime Germany. Local churches performed Christmas concerts in German for the prisoners. The First Methodist Church Choir learned German carols phonetically. Mrs. Sarah Patterson, the choir director, whose son was fighting in Italy, led the performance. The cognitive dissonance of American mothers singing to enemy soldiers while their own sons fought Germans broke several prisoners emotionally. The Christmas feast quartermaster menus show roast turkey, 1 pound per man, ham, candied sweet potatoes, green beans, cornbread stuffing, cranberry sauce, mince pie, apple pie, ice cream, beer for enlisted prisoners, California wine for officers, approximately 5,000 calories per man. Meanwhile, German civilian rations, when available, averaged 200 calories per day. Racial dynamics, a direct challenge to Nazi ideology. Working in Texas exposed German POWs to American racial complexities that contradicted both Nazi propaganda and the American reputation for racism. At Camp Hearn, black soldiers from the 359th Infantry Regiment occasionally served guard duty. German POWs, products of Nazi racial indoctrination, found themselves taking orders from black Americans. Several requested transfers rather than submit to Negro authority. All requests were denied. Lieutenant Colonel Stiles wrote in a December 1943 report, "German objections to Negro guards are noted and ignored." Yet prisoners also witnessed contradictions of American segregation. POWs could eat in restaurants where black soldiers could not. They could attend movie theaters where their own guards were barred from the main seating section. They enjoyed social freedoms denied to some Americans. This paradox, being treated better in some contexts than U.S. citizens, scrambled ideological certainty. On agricultural work sites, documented in Farm Security Administration records, POWs worked beside Mexican American and black laborers. Mixed-race work crews proved more efficient than segregated ones, challenging Nazi theories that racial purity produced superior productivity. POWs picked cotton alongside black workers who often outperformed them, undermining assumptions of Aryan superiority. Case studies: 3 POW transformations. 1. Hermann Booth's share. Arrived at Camp Hearn in June 1943 as a committed Nazi. His memoir describes ideological collapse through cumulative experiences. His turning point was Christmas 1943. These people whose sons we tried to kill gave us gifts. Their kindness was not weakness, but strength, the confidence of victors who had already won not just the war, but the peace that would follow. Butcher immigrated to America in 1953, became a citizen in 1958, and worked as an engineer for General Motors until retirement. 2. Georg Gartner. Escaped from Camp Deming, New Mexico, in 1945, living under the name Dennis Wiles for 40 years. Instead of fleeing to Mexico, he remained in America, married an American woman, raised children, and worked as a tennis instructor. When he surrendered in 1985, documented in Hitler's Last Soldier in America, he had been American longer than German. 3. Reinhold Pell escaped from Camp Washington, Illinois, not from mistreatment but boredom and curiosity about American life. He lived in Chicago for 7 years, married an American woman, and voluntarily surrendered in 1953. The FBI found he had committed no crimes beyond illegal presence. He became a citizen in 1959 and a successful businessman. Other camps, a nationwide pattern. Camp Alva, Oklahoma specialized in agricultural training. Department of Agriculture records show POWs managed a 200-acre demonstration farm using American agricultural methods. Camp Concordia, Kansas, became famous for its art program. Murals created by POWs still adorn public buildings. The camp orchestra, using donated instruments, performed concerts for civilians. Their artwork is now held in Kansas museums. Camp Trinidad, Colorado faced winter temperatures reaching 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Quartermaster files show POWs were issued Arctic-grade clothing, insulated barracks, and increased caloric rations, 4,000 calories daily. Swiss inspector André Ponch wrote in February 1944, "Prisoners here receive better winter provisions than Wehrmacht troops on the Eastern Front." Information transparency, the most dangerous influence. Perhaps nothing stunned German prisoners more than American openness. Camps provided newspapers that criticized the war effort, revealed production delays, discussed strategic failures, and published opposition politics. The Special Projects Division deliberately provided multiple news sources, knowing totalitarian thinking collapses under exposure to free press. Radio programs included Bob Hope mocking politicians, Edward R. Murrow questioning military strategy. Puppy. Congressional debates broadcast live, all accessible to enemy prisoners. The 1944 presidential election seemed suicidal to German military minds. Roosevelt faced serious opposition. Newspapers mocked the commander-in-chief. Yet the war effort strengthened. Democracy functioned through disagreement, a concept completely foreign to totalitarian ideology. ICRC inspections, independent verification. Red Cross inspection reports consistently rated American POW camps above Geneva Convention standards. Inspector Guy Mate wrote in August 1944, "American camps exceed treaty requirements in all categories. Specific Camp Hearn data, caloric intake, 3,300 calories day, Geneva requirement, $2,000, living space, 40 SQ/FT per man. Geneva requirement, 27 SQ/FT, medical staff, 1 doctor per 500 prisoners. Geneva requirement, 1 per 1,000. Inspector Emil Sandstrom concluded, Americans treat prisoners as temporarily displaced persons, not enemies. Industrial exposure, a new understanding of power. At the Lone Star Steel Plant in Dangerfield, Texas, where POWs worked from 1944 to 45, monthly production exceeded the entire Ruhr Valley's pre-bombing annual output. The secret wasn't machinery alone, but morale. Workers competed for bonuses, suggested improvements, and took pride in output. POWs saw shift production boards displayed like sports scores, workers buying war bonds, patriotism tied to productivity. At Texas rail yards, POWs witnessed logistical efficiency the Wehrmacht could not match. The MKT Railroad Smithville yard operated with seamless coordination, no central planning, only capitalism functioning at wartime speed. Preparing POWs for post-war Germany. As Germany collapsed in 1945, American authorities prepared prisoners for reconstruction. Documented programs included civil administration, public health, agricultural modernization, engineering and infrastructure, business management. By May 1945, 31,000 in vocational training, 18,000 studying English, 12,000 in agricultural programs. 8,500 in technical courses, 6,200 in business administration. State Department officials briefed prisoners on early concepts of the Marshall Plan before it was public. This generosity shattered the last remnants of Nazi belief in racial struggle. The numbers, evidence of transformation, of 425,000 German POWs held in the U.S., escape attempts, 2022, 0.52%, successful escapes lasting 30-plus days, 54, 0.1%, sabotage incidents, 7, 0.1%, work refusals, 178, 0.04%, voluntary labor participation, 87%. Post-war Allied surveys found 74% held favorable views of American democracy, 61% supported Marshall Plan aid, 55% favored a German-American alliance, 38% wished to immigrate to America, 23% maintained correspondence with American families. Immigration records show 5,000 former POWs legally immigrated during the 1950s. 92% later became U.S. citizens. Impact on West Germany. Former POWs played major roles in rebuilding democratic West Germany. 48 became Bundestag members, 312 served as mayors or councillors, 147 in agricultural modernization, 341 in education, 4,165 in business and industry. Hans-Georg von Studnitz, former POW and later industrialist, said in 1965, "We returned from America with knowledge of how democracy works, how free markets operate, how diverse people cooperate. We had seen the future, and we knew it worked." Legacy Camp Herne closed in December 1945, but relationships endured. The Herne Heritage League preserves letters sent by former POWs for decades afterward. In 1984, on the 40th anniversary of D-Day, 50 former POWs returned to Herne. They embraced old guards, laid flowers at an American Legion memorial, and spoke openly of their transformation. Fritz Zimmermann said, "We came as enemies believing in racial superiority. We left understanding that democracy's chaos is its strength and diversity creates unity." Afhu. Historians' consensus, major scholarly works, Kramer's Nazi Prisoners of War in America, Gansberg's Stalag USA, Thompson's Men in German Uniform, Robbins's The Barbed Wire College, confirm the same conclusion. American treatment of German POWs is the most successful example of ideological transformation in modern history. But final judgment. The German POWs who reached America between 1943 and 1946 witnessed sights that seemed impossible by the standards of Nazism. Every casual freedom, every small kindness, every unexpected generosity chipped away at totalitarian conditioning. They expected to find a weak, divided nation. Instead, they found a society so confident that it could afford mercy to its enemies. They didn't just observe democracy. They experienced it. They didn't just survive captivity, they were transformed by it. The unusual sights that shocked them were ordinary to Americans, but revolutionary to men raised under tyranny. In those experiences lay the seeds of the Marshall Plan, the Atlantic Alliance, and the post-war democratic rebirth of Europe. America's greatest victory wasn't on the battlefield. It was in the prison camps, where enemies became advocates not through propaganda, but through reality, not through force, but through humanity.